Next, let's go to class ValueNotifier page. Here, I have created a class called the person in advance. Person class is a class that has a string type variable name and an integer type variable age as members, and created a factory constructor called person.initial to be used as the initial state. Person.initial returns a person instance with name John and age 10. Next, we will create a class that extends a value notifier or person type called person value notifier. Click the light bulb icon next to person value notifier and select the item create constructor to call super.ValueNotifier. Here, delete the value argument of the person value notifier constructor and replace the value of super with the person.initial. Next, create the void type increment age function, increase age, and then print the incremented age. First, store the person value notifier instance in the person notifier final variable. Create the void type underscore person listener function. The underscore person listener function displays a dialog when age reaches 13 and moves to other page when age reaches 15. In the inState function, register underscore person listener function using the person notifier's listener function. Next, in the dispose function, remove the underscore person listener using person notifier's remove listener and dispose the person notifier. Next, create two floating action buttons. Call the increment age function in the first floating action button and directly increase the age in the second floating action button and output the increased age. Next, replace the center widget with a person type of value listenable builder. Assign person notifier to value listenable, and builder returns a center widget that has a text widget as a child, which displays name and age in the text widget. Let's do a hard restart and run it. Let's tap the floating action button on the left. Age does not increase. However, the increased age is output to the debug console. Let's tap the right floating action button. Again, the screen remains unchanged. However, the increased age is output to the debug console. ValueNotifier uses the equality operator to notify listeners when the value changes. For the primitive type integer, it was self-evident whether it was equal or not. But for objects, we need to think about how to define equality. If you think about it, although we change the age, the person instance we use as a value is the same instance. So for ValueNotifier, there was no need to notify the listener because the value did not change. In this case, there are two methods. The first is to override the equality operator and hash code of the object so that if the failed value is different, it is treated as a different object. However, overriding the equality operator and hash code for a mutable class such as person is not desirable because it may cause an issue when the class is used for collection. In fact, if we override the equality operator and hash code for a mutable person class, a lint warning called avoid equals and hash code on mutable classes is displayed. The second way is to use notifier listeners. In the increment age function, we will call notifier listeners after incrementing age. Let's test after hard restart. Tap the floating action button on the left and it will now reflect on the screen. On the other hand, in the case of the right button, age is still increased, but it is not reflected on the screen. That is, in this case, instead of incrementing the value directly, you need to change the value in a function inside ValueNotifier and call notifier listeners. Finally, let's look at the case of using an instance of an immutable class as a value of ValueNotifier. Let's go to immutable value notifier page.dart. I made the person class immutable class. First, we annotated the person class as immutable. Since we made it an immutable class, we made all member variables final. Factory constructor is the same as before. When an instance is created with an immutable class, member variables cannot be changed. So, in this case, create a new instance without changing the existing instance. In this case, create a copy with a function that can be used conveniently. The copy with function provides a convenience in creating a new instance because it uses the value of the previous instance as it is for members not given as arguments. I also write the equality operator in hash code. Defining the equality operator in this way means that if there are two-person instances, the two-person instances are considered equal if the field values are all the same. Packages that simplify this task include equatable and freeze the packages. Next time, I plan to make a video about the freeze package as well. Next, we'll create a person value notifier that extends the value notifier of the person type. As the initial value, I gave the factory constructor person.initial and created functions called increment age and toggle name. Each function changes the value, but since the value is an instance of the immutable person class, you cannot directly change the member. Use the copy function to assign a new person instance to value. First, store the person value notifier instance in the person notifier final variable. Next, when age reaches 33, a dialog is displayed, and when age reaches 35, a function to move to other page is created using addListener and remove listener of value notifier and disposes when it is no longer needed. Since this code is very similar to the previous code, I will not explain it separately. If you are curious, please see the source code. Next, create two floating action buttons and call the increment age function on the first floating action button and the toggle name function on the second floating action button. Next, replace the center widget with the person type of value listenable builder. Assign person notifier to value listenable, and builder returns a center widget that has a text widget as a child and displays name and age in the text widget. Let's do a hard restart and run it. If you press the left button, age increases, and if you press the right button, the name is toggled. You can see that the result of this change is reflected in the widget. And when age reaches 33, a dialog is displayed, and when age reaches 35, it moves to other page. Let's do some additional tests here. Let's insert notifier listeners in increment age function. Let's do hard restart and test. When it became 33, a dialog was displayed, but it was displayed twice. At 35, I moved to other page, but the other page was pushed twice. As to why this has occurred, value notifier notifies listeners when it determines that the value had changed through equality operator check. But because we called notifier listeners, we are notified once more. Let's delete the notifier listeners and do another test. Instead of calling the person notifier .toggle name function in the second floating action button, let's change the value directly. Let's do a hard restart and test. Let's press the right floating action button. You can see the name has been changed to haha. In this time, we learned about various ways to use a value notifier and what to pay attention to. StateNotifier, which will be introduced the next time, has quite a few similarities to value notifier that uses immutable states.